the NFL's divisional weekend as one of the most exciting on the sports betting calendar, and we've spent all compiling the best betting notes, trends and prop picks all week, giving you insights with an edge to help you win your bets in the second round of the NFL playoffs. Chargers vs Patriots, -4, 47.5. White hot in the playoffs, the New England Patriots return to a familiar position as they host a divisional round game, and we're expecting a familiar name to have a big afternoon in James White. Tom Brady tends to look White's way a little more often in the playoffs as his pass-catching back average is 4.3 catches for 36.6 receiving yards. His touches were down over the final month of the season, but signs point towards him being heavily involved in the game plan today. The Chargers possess a solid rush defense, ranked 10th in rushing DVOA. They are, however, vulnerable to pass-catching backs, with a rank of 23rd in passing DVOA to running backs while allowing 8.6 passes and 59.3 receiving yards per game to the position. This makes sense. The Chargers have a solid pass rush with Joey Bosa and Melvin Ingram, so opposing quarterbacks need to get rid of the ball quickly. Last year, White put up 5 catches for 85 yards against the Chargers, and we're looking at him to do something similar today. Take the over 45.5 for his receiving yards total. Value in Hogan. Chris Hogan began the year as a fantasy sleeper. Then he got off to a slow start. Josh Gordon came to town, and he was basically forgotten. In the 2 games since Gordon left New England, however, Hogan has been forced back into a starting role and has played 83% and 94% of the snaps. In Week 17, Brady targeted Hogan 11 times and he responded with 6 catches for 64 yards. This is not a plus matchup for wide receivers as the Chargers rank 10th in passing DVOA, but the defense is likely to focus on Julian Edelman, Rob Gronkowski, and maybe even James White more than it will worry about Hogan. Because Hogan had such a bad regular season, his receptions total for today is set at just 2.5, and we're seeing value in the over. Gordon expected to play. Reports on Tuesday were that the Chargers expect running back Melvin Gordon to play on Sunday at New England after a knee issue cost him snaps early in their wild-card win over Baltimore. Gordon is apparently dealing with a slight knee sprain, which is a similar issue to the one that forced him out of 3 games earlier in the season. We backed a winner in predicting the under for Gordon's rushing yards total in what was a very difficult matchup against the Ravens. He did manage to find the end zone, however, which saved his day from a fantasy perspective. This week, he faces an easier matchup on paper as New England ranked 19th in rushing DVOA during the regular season. The Ravens were ranked 6th. However, the Pats were one of the stingiest team in the league when it came to giving up rushing touchdowns, as they allowed just 7 all season, the second fewest in the league. We'll dig into his totals later in the week, but the early week lean is to the under 0.5 for his rushing touchdowns total. Henry activated. The Chargers activated Hunter Henry from injured reserve on Monday, meaning he'll be making his season debut as Los Angeles plays New England on Sunday. There were reports early last week that he'd be on the field for the wildcard game after getting in some practices last week, but that didn't happen. It will be hard to trust Henry on Sunday as he's likely to play just a handful of snaps as he works his way back from the ACL tear he suffered during OTAs. At 6'5", Henry is a big target who could make a key play or two on third down or in the red zone after catching 12 touchdowns through his first 29 games in the NFL. The Patriots are one of the better teams in the league at defending tight ends with a DVOA rank of 8 against the position. However, the Pats did allow 8 touchdowns to opposing tight ends, which is tied for the 5th most in the league. We're not big on backing players in their first games returning from injury, but if you're looking for a high-risk, high-reward bet, backing Henry to go over 0.5 touchdown receptions or to score a touchdown at any time could pay out nicely. There are a couple of clear mismatches that we're going to look to exploit in the later game today. The first one is Philadelphia's running game, if you can call it that, against New Orleans' rush defense. The Eagles can't figure out who to give the ball to and are coming off a game where their running backs gained just 43 yards on 23 carries. It was a difficult matchup against Chicago's second-ranked defense in rushing DVOA, but the Saints are ranked third in the same metric. The Eagles might try to establish the run early, but they're likely to run into a New Orleans wall. This will force Nick Foles to the air early and often if Philly hopes to move the ball. Game flow should also force Foles to air it out all evening, as the Saints are favored by 8 and score an average of 34.1 points at home. The only way the Eagles stay with the Saints is by throwing it a ton, and we're backing Foles to go over 39.5 passing attempts. Brees. Why? Sunday. The other clear mismatch is Drew Brees against the Eagles secondary, a unit that has been banged up all season. Philly gave up 269.2 passing yards per game this season, the third most in the NFL, and gave up 300 or more passing yards in 3 of its last 4 games. Last week, the Eagles even allowed Mitch Trubisky to throw for 303 yards last week, which was the most yards any QB threw for on Wild Card Weekend. Then there's Brees. He was a beast at home this season, throwing for 321.6 passing yards per game, including his 364-yard game against the Eagles earlier in the season. For his career, Brees averages 305.8 passing yards in the Superdome during the playoffs. We're expecting another lights-out performance from Brees at home and backing the over 286.5 for his passing yards total. Jeffrey limited. Eagles receiver Alshon Jeffrey was listed as limited in practice on Thursday with a rib injury that he apparently suffered on Wild Card Weekend. He was also listed as limited for Thursday's walkthrough session, though there doesn't seem to be any concern for his availability on Sunday. Jeffrey has been hot since Nick Foles took over in Week 15, posting receiving lines of 8-160, 3-82, and 5-5-9-1 to finish off the regular season before going for 6-82 last week in the wildcard game. He only grabbed 4 catches for 33 yards when the Eagles visited the Saints back in Week 11, but the Saints do not have a great pass defense with a rank of 22 in passing DVOA. New Orleans gave up some big days to perimeter receivers down the stretch. Think Antonio Brown's 1-4-1-8-5-2 in Week 16 and Julio Jones 1-1-1-4-7-0 in Week 12, and Jeffrey could be in line for a nice divisional round game. We're backing the over 65.5 for his receiving yards total. Tate's big day if we're not counting Bears kicker Cody Parkey. Receiver Golden Tate is Philadelphia's hero this week after his last-minute touchdown grab gave the Eagles the lead and eventually the win on Sunday. Tate wound up catching 5 passes for 46 yards, finally validating the third-round pick that the Eagles paid to acquire him back at the trade deadline. Tate and the Eagles travel to New Orleans on Sunday to take on the Saints as a 7.5-point underdog with a game total of 50.5. Tate will be in a good spot to have another nice performance against a Saints defense that is ranked 22nd in passing DVOA. The game script could also be in his favor, as the Eagles should be chasing points as a big underdog, although that was also supposed to happen last week and didn't. Tate posted 5 catches for 48 yards back in Week 11 when Philly got smoked at the Superdome, and we're expecting a similar receiving line this week. Take the over on his receptions total, assuming it's set at 4.5 when prop markets open later in the week. No answers in Philly's backfield heading into wildcard weekend. We talked about how Philadelphia's backfield has become a running back committee. Things became a bit more clear on Sunday as Josh Adams was taken out of the game plan with 1 carry for 2 yards. Darren Sproles wound up leading the Eagles in carries with 13 for 21 yards, while Wendell Smallwood took 8 handoffs for 20 yards. Both recorded 2 receptions, while Sproles outsnapped Smallwood 38-28. We predicted last week that Sproles would be heavily involved as the preferred pass-catching option in a game where the Eagles were supposed to have been playing catch-up. Instead, Philly played with the lead for most of the game and Sproles was still the no. 1 back, although he lost us a bet by coming up 4.5 yards shy of his receiving yards total. This week is very similar for the Eagles as they are a big road dog and going against one of the best run defenses in the NFL as the Saints rank 3rd in rushing DVOA. However, there's one big difference between New Orleans and Chicago. The Bears rank 10th in passing DVOA against running backs, while the Saints rank 29th. We expect Sproles to be the preferred backfield option on Sunday and for Foles to target him a few more times than he did this past weekend. We're again taking the over for Sproles receiving yards total. Want even more free NFL picks? See what our covers experts have to offer.